Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Another day, another letter. And now the EFF has sent a letter, and they've sent a letter to the ANC. And here's what the letter says. It's addressed to Mr. Mbalula. Let's go over it, the highlights, and then we'll discuss the implications. Particularly, is this letter going to the ANC too late from the EFF? Is it reasonable? Is it likely to be accepted? What is the EFF upside from this letter? What is the EFF downside? And what are the risk factors from an ANC EFF arrangement, if any? Anyway, here's what it says. Dear Mr. Mbalula, reference, bilateral meeting on the Constitution of South Africa's 7th Democratic Administration. Following our bilateral meeting held on the 28th of June 2024 at Inanda Country Club, Johannesburg, about the Constitution of South Africa's 7th Democratic Administration, we wish to state our position in writing for the benefit of your internal deliberations. In addition, it serves to avoid multiple interpretations of our oral submissions. Number one, the EFF acknowledges the ANC as a progressive movement that has played a gallant role in the advancement of the liberation of the oppressed from apartheid and colonialism, with the emphasis of liberating Black people in general and Africans in particular. Number two, the EFF characterizes the ANC based on its policy of the Freedom Charter and its theory of liberation, the National Democratic Revolution. We accept that this also means it has to be pursued to build a non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society. Number three, the EFF is committed to the rule of law, supremacy of the Constitution, anti-corruption, accountability, and transparency. Number four, the EFF believes that should the ANC depart from its historic mission as encapsulated in the Freedom Charter and the NDR and begin to advance reactionary, collaborationist, and right-wing political programs, it must be opposed. Number five, the EFF is of the view that based on successive election manifestos of the ANC, in particular the 2024 Elections Manifesto, there is more that brings us together to co-govern and hit the ground running. Number six, we recognize that despite differences in tactics and disagreement over the years and most recently, the 2024 election outcomes present an opportunity to cooperate on the basis of mutual respect and in the interest of building trust, which can only be built in struggle and not in abstractions. Number seven, the EFF and the ANC have already been working together in coalition government at a local state in the provinces of Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and the Free State since 2022. These governments, what about these governments? Let's see. These governments have brought much needed stability in affected municipalities. This must demonstrate a sensible and logical ground to build trust and cooperation even at a provincial and national level. In light of the above, it is well known that in 2016 and 2021 local government elections, the EFF voted for opposition parties, inclusive of the Forum for Service Delivery, Tambazimbi Residents Association, National Freedom Party, DA, and IFP in municipalities. This was following the EFF and ANC's inability to reach cooperation agreements on both occasions, mostly due to the ANC's national leadership's reluctance to entertain EFF's political and ideological propositions. Number nine, nevertheless, due to the provincial and regional leadership of the ANC in different provinces where there were hung municipalities, an agreement was developed which saw the EFF and ANC participating in one government. Since this development, the EFF has not turned against its commitments, despite the ANC not honoring its commitments in full. Number 10, in the consecutive meeting of the 7th Democratic Parliament, we fielded candidates and contested positions of the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and the President following a signed agreement between the ANC and the DA at the time. Our contestation was to symbolically and publicly register our protest and utmost approval at an ANC-DA alliance. Number 11, the EFF is willing to constitute and participate in an ANC-led government together with other parties, with the exception of the Democratic Alliance and Freedom Front Plus. Number 12, Our objection to work with the DA and Freedom Front Plus rests on the following. A. The DA and Freedom Front Plus represent the imperialist, counter-revolutionary, white supremacist agenda demonstrated by their rejection of progressive internationalism. For example, Palestine, BRICS, Ukraine, Cuba, Western Sahara, affirmative action, and expropriation of land without compensation for equal redistribution to address the apartheid and colonial land regime. B. The DA openly wrote to a foreign and imperialistic government of the United States of America to interfere and supervise South Africa's democratic elections, an act that outrightly undermines our sovereignty and insults our collective intelligence as a country. C. The participation of the DA and Freedom Front Plus in the government of national unity only seeks to neutralize the possibility of an economic transformation that an ANC and EFF coalition present, such as the creation of a state bank, nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank, insourcing of workers, free education, healthcare, housing, and sanitation. D. The DA and Freedom Front Plus openly flirt with the cessation of the Western Cape or Cape Town and the celebration of white supremacist history, culture on the recognition of Orania. Right, they go on. E. In a co-government situation with the DA and Freedom Front Plus, most of the white leaders of the DA have demonstrated the inability of taking leadership and authority from black leaders / people, a history that is well documented by many black leaders within their ranks. They are permanently condescending and regard themselves superior, with a natural right to preside over blacks. 13. The EFF proposes the following. A new agreement or statement of intent between the EFF and ANC instead of the ANC's statement of intent agreed to by the GNU partners. This means we enter into an agreement with the ANC as leader of government and not with other parties it may invite to government. B. Such an agreement or statement of intent must necessarily include key principles informed by the strategic objective of the total liberation of the oppressed as encapsulated in the Freedom Charter and progressive internationalism. C. The agreement or statement of intent must also necessarily include the principles of redress and equality as captured in Section 9.2 of the Constitution, which states that to promote the achievement of equality, legislative and other measures designed to protect or advance persons or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination may be taken. D. The agreement must translate into provincial and municipal governments with the aim of government stability and accelerated quality service delivery. E. We give our assurance and guarantee that we shall never work with the DA in any sphere of government to remove the ANC from power where it is elected as leader of the executive or legislature. F. We are willing to participate in any executive as long as the DA and Freedom Front Plus are not included, and affirm the principle that the president and or premiers have the prerogative to determine the composition of the executive after consultation with the EFF leadership. G. We are opposed to sealed agreements wherein ministers and departments will not be accountable to the leader of the executive, for instance, president and premiers. H. We nonetheless express our desire to find representation in all clusters of national government as ministers or deputies. We're willing to take leadership in legislatures in the form of speaker or deputy speakers, chairpersons, or of portfolio committees. Right. Then they go on. We would like to state that we are not in the mission to pursue cabinet positions for careerist purposes. We seek participation that will bring meaningful and historic change to the lives of oppressed people and the people of South Africa as a whole. We appeal to the ANC to consider this proposal in the interest of the broader liberation of the oppressed. We must collectively take seriously the fact that counter-revolutionary, imperialist, and domestic forces are closing in on the ANC to institute a soft coup and undo gains of the oppressed. No other election has seen so much mobilization by big business, white-owned, foreign, and domestic to financially fund an outcome that will see the ANC not working with the EFF in a coalition. This represents the greatest strategic threat to democracy yet and the sovereignty of South Africa as a country. The ANC must consider the fact that despite all the effort by big business and imperialist forces to influence the election towards a liberal outcome, our people still gave the organizations historically associated with the liberation movement over 66% of the seats in parliament. We conclusively advise that the ANC must not work or co-govern with the DA and Freedom Front Plus in the interest of its historic mission. The ANC must do, even if it believes that the EFF is not. This the ANC must do, even if the ANC believes that the EFF is not its preferred partner. This moment may not last forever. In the near future, capital may ultimately reduce the liberation struggle forces way below 50%. Our chance at survival rests on pushing forward with the total liberation of our people based on the popular programs of the anti-apartheid struggle. In the struggle for economic freedom. Secretary General, Commissar Marshal Dlamini. So the EFF has written this letter, and I read it out in full so that you have context, full context. I actually don't like summarizing these letters because I think it's important to get the whole gist of everything that has been said and everything that is on the table. So number one, I think it's important to note that the EFF made this public. This did not leak. They posted it themselves to clearly articulate their position, their interpretation of everything that is happening in these coalition negotiations. Number two, it's clear that there are challenges with the coalition negotiations as they have been unfolding with the Democratic Alliance, because the Democratic Alliance has asked for 12 ministries, then 8 ministries, then wanted to insist on the Department of Trade, and then also now has still been trying to threaten to pull out of the coalition altogether. So it's clear there are some discrepancies in coalition negotiations as things stand. It does seem as though that the ANC and the DA are close to finding each other, and that they have mostly ironed out most of the kinks that were standing in the way. From what I've been hearing and seeing, it looks as if that Department of Trade has been swapped with the Department of Agriculture. There is a large farming community that will be happy that agriculture is in the hands of the Democratic Alliance. Commercial farmers, for instance, they'll feel that they can articulate their concerns about the security of farms, etc. So it may be a good trade-off to give, from the ANC's perspective, to give the DA that particular ministry, even though it's going to be something that on the ground will create a lot of resistance, because many people still view the issue of land justice as a pertinent issue that needs to be resolved. So to have the DA running the Ministry of Agriculture will seem that there is now a gatekeeper and an opponent to land redistribution, land reform, and land justice, considering the fact that we saw various laws take away land, dispossess Black people from land ownership, the Land Act of 1913 being one of the signature pieces of legislation, the Group Areas Act being another. The land patterns in South Africa are still such that you can see the effects of apartheid continue to replicate, be that in the racial and class dispositions in the suburbs, the racial and class dispositions in the affluent parts of cities, and all of these things continue to manifest even in 2024, which is why sometimes when people just say, well, this happened, this was 30 years ago, or this was 20 years ago. This is what one of the people were saying when they were uttering racist comments. They're like, oh, this so long ago. Why are you still obsessed with such and such? The reality is the wounds, the economic and systemic wounds of apartheid have still not healed. And the economic and social consequences of colonialism and apartheid have not yet been rectified. So to ask people to move on is like asking somebody who is still in the middle of surgery why they can't get over the fact that they are injured or sick. How can they do that when they are still undergoing the process of fixing the very problem that exists, right? And this is what also affirmative action policies have really been created for, to rectify the injustices perpetrated by legislation such as the Bantu Education Act. All of these things continue to manifest themselves in different ways even now. So the EFF has made this particular document available openly, transparently. Is it too late? I think it is too late. I think that so much has happened and so much has been factored in. To restart the process now could be something that really causes a lot more commotion, right? But you know what? I think the EFF knows that it's too late. Is this offer reasonable? From the ideological perspective of both the EFF and the ANC, it is reasonable for the EFF to say, hey, we actually make better sense as a partnership nationally than you and the Democratic Alliance, based on the Freedom Charter, based on the policy interventions that you have placed. The Democratic Alliance opposes land reform. The Democratic Alliance opposes affirmative action policies, be they employment equity policies, broad-based Black economic empowerment policies, as well as university affirmative action policies. They are opposed to those things. They are opposed to the minimum wage. They are opposed to a variety of protections that have been created for workers in South Africa. The Democratic Alliance is diametrically opposed. So it is reasonable for the EFF to say this. There is also an electoral argument that can be made around where did the voter mandate go? 66% of the population did vote for left-leaning parties. That is true. So this argument is reasonable. Is it likely to be accepted? No, it's not likely to be accepted by the current ANC leadership. Why? Number one, because of that lateness. Number two, because the actual leadership of the ANC right now is one that is pro-markets. President Ramaphosa is a capitalist. He's a billionaire. He is an owner of the factors of production, right? Whether it's farms, mines, all of that, he owns those things, and he believes in capitalism fundamentally. This is why we've also seen him appointing people in positions who have pushed for privatization, who have advanced those same very pro-market, pro-capital interests. So as the principal at the head of all of this, as the president of the ANC, he doesn't have an appetite to. His particular political faction doesn't have an appetite to. Two, there are concerns that the EFF is very close with people like Panyaza, Lesufi, and that giving more power to those actors within the ANC actually makes President Ramaphosa more vulnerable, not less vulnerable. So this is not likely to be accepted. Also, the president has a strong relationship with the markets and, market leaders, market influencers, market voices, billionaires who are based in Stellenbosch. His own brother-in-law is one of those billionaires who actually owns a lot of factors of production, who also recently bought a property in Stellenbosch. So it's not likely that the oligarchs of South Africa are going to be favorable to this. They made a lot of investments, donating to President Ramaphosa himself, donating to the DA, to the IFP, to really try to make sure that there was a possibility for President Ramaphosa to make a deal with these people. And all of that Moonshot Pact was just a play to actually make sure that the DA is in a position to make a deal with the ANC. And there's been voice recordings from 2019 where Helen Zille was saying this, and I posted one of them in an earlier video where I spoke about a DA-ANC coalition. So it's not likely to be accepted, but also it's not likely to be accepted because of the perceptions that the EFF is a violent party, that the EFF is a racist party towards Black people. These are perceptions that exist in white South Africa, and also that the EFF is a corrupt party because of VBS and VBS allegations. I've discussed these things before, and I don't think all of them are necessarily fair and or true, but right now I'm talking about the perception. So if the ANC were to wake up tomorrow and say we have a deal with the EFF, what's likely to happen is that the rand will fall. And that's not something that the current ANC leadership will be wanting to do. They'll tell you about the cost of living, how a weaker rand will lead to more inflation. And to be honest with you, those things are true. If the rand gets weaker, the cost of living will go higher, inflation will go higher. And all of those things are not nice to hear. It's not nice to hear that markets have all of this power, but they do. So this is also why it's not likely to be accepted. So if it's late, even though it's reasonable, and it's not likely to be accepted. Why did the EFF make this move? I think they made this move knowing all of the things that I've said, but they want to put the ANC in a tight corner where it becomes clear, number one, that any story that the EFF was being unreasonable or aggressive or chachara or ill-disciplined, all of that can no longer be true, because we gave you the statement and we said, we're happy to let you guys lead. We want to support your manifesto. We want to actually liberate Black people in South Africa. So now, if the ANC continues dealing with the DA, then it becomes clear that, in fact, the ANC is the one that's selling out the majority, not the EFF, and that there was an option for them to make another deal. So this is basically a setup for a 5-year attack by the EFF whenever anything goes down, for them to say, we gave you an offer. We were willing to walk away from our thing to make you guys have the right stability and to be able to execute your vision. So this is the thing. What is the downside from this? I think the downside from this for the EFF is that it may look to other people who joined their progressive caucus that, hey, you were just with us in the progressive caucus, now you're going away. You just told us. This kind of feeds into that flip-flopper narrative, and that they cannot be trusted. They are opportunistic politicians. But they may view the strategic benefit of pointing out that, hey, we gave a good deal to President Ramaphosa and he didn't take it, as something that is more important than sticking with the progressive caucus. And anyway, other people have already left the progressive caucus, so there may be no real expectation that the EFF must stay in that caucus from their own base. What is the ANC calculus at this point? Well, I think that the ANC is just going to say, no, EFF, they were late. They should have said this earlier. At the beginning, they were unreasonable. I don't think that Fikile Mbalula is going to pay this a lot of attention in the context of a serious deal. But what it can do is make the DA recognize that, hey, other players are still active on this particular table. And this may actually push the DA and the ANC closer together to make a deal. Because the cabinet's supposed to be announced maybe even tomorrow. So we don't know when it's going to be announced. But this kind of a play by the EFF could actually then give ANC leverage to close the deal with the ANC. What do you think, though? Do you think that this is a good idea from the EFF? Do you think it's reasonable? Do you think I've been too harsh on the EFF? Or do you think that it is what it is? As I've said, I'm really keen to hear your views. This story is dynamic. So many letters, right? Office of the Secretary General. Just a day ago, we were dealing with Office of the President. Then we were dealing with letter from John, letter from Helen. It's been a week of letters. Letters. Let us now reflect on all of the letters, right? Where are things now? What do you think? Do you think that this coalition situation is much worse than you thought, or is this just all to be expected? Let's have a conversation. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. 65% of you haven't subscribed yet. Please subscribe. It helps YouTube find the channel. It helps YouTube know that you love this content and you want to see more of this content. Till the next one.